Stranger Things Season 4, which just ended, was in many important ways the best one yet. The show stayed true to its roots, while also taking the story in new and, I have to say, much scarier directions. There were some shocking deaths in this season, and many of them were meant to stick with viewers long after the season was over. In fact, there are a few scenes from this season that deserve to be thought of as some of the scariest it has ever made. First, when Chrissy is killed and Victor Creel tells his story. Very early on in the season, it becomes clear that Stranger Things is going to have some new, more intense thrills. When Chrissy dies in a horrible way, it is meant to scare not only Eddie, who sees it, but also the audience. This new thing that came out of the Upside Down is much stronger than anything we've seen before, so this scene shows that the stakes in this season are going to be higher than ever before. And if they aren't met, the results will be even worse. In the episode Dear Billy, Robin and Nancy pretend to be thesis students to get close to Victor Creel, who has been in prison for decades for killing his family. Victor knows that Robin and Nancy think he's innocent, so when he turns around to face them, they see the wounds where his eyes should be. Not only do Victor's injuries make him feel worse about losing his family and remind him of the horrors every day, but the idea that Max might have to go through something similar is scary. Next, Fred starts seeing things in Nancy's car and when Patrick dies in the water. Fans notice that Fred may be going the same way as Chrissy when he starts to see things while he and Nancy are in Eddie's caravan looking for the murder suspect. When an officer asks Nancy and Fred about their presence at the crime scene, Fred's worst fears come true when the officer calls him a murderer. In The Nina Project, Patrick, who works with Lucas and Jason, starts to go the same way that Chrissy and Fred did earlier in the season. He has a headache and nosebleeds, and he sees the grandfather clock in his mind. When he and Jason find out where Eddie's hiding, Eddie uses a boat to escape into the lake, and they swim after him. Patrick is the next person Vecna kills. He dies in the lake in the same horrible way that Chrissy and Fred did. Seeing Jason hold Patrick's twisted, bloody, and eyeless body in his arms was both scary and heartbreaking. Fred's scar on his face opens up and blood starts to run down his cheek. The officer keeps insulting Fred while he changes into a demon with sharp teeth and tentacles over his body. Moving on, when Vecna nearly kills Max and when Nancy is taken to the Phantom Pool. Max is of course one of Stranger Things' most popular characters. Because of this, the fact that she is easy for Vecna to control makes the season sad, and it reaches one of its high points when he's able to control her. Even though she gets away, the whole thing is very scary. The show does a good job of playing with the viewer's emotions, making them wonder if the characters they've grown to like and care about will ever get away. The scene makes the audience feel both for and with Max, making them feel the same fear that she does. One of the characters on Stranger Things who has changed the most over the show's 4 seasons is Nancy, but the death of her friend Barb still haunts her, which is what makes the vision she has when Vecna is around so scary. When she sees Barb's dead body, it's scary for her and for the people watching from the audience. It's a reference to the first season and a reminder of how bad the Upside Down's power is. Also, it is just plain upsetting to see the rotting remains of a character you liked. Next up, the fight with the Demogorgon and the flashback to Vecna's childhood. One thing that makes Stranger Things one of the best shows on Netflix is how well its visual effects are done. Even now, Demogorgons are still very scary, and this is especially true when Hopper and the other prisoners have to fight one. As always, the creature's slithering movements are so real that it's impossible not to feel terrified along with the characters. Even more disturbing is the fact that the Russians are so stupid that they think they can control such a horrible thing. Vecna is one of the most interesting bad guys on TV in the 21st century. Part of the reason for this is that despite how scary he looks, he's still a person in some ways. When he shows Nancy visions of his childhood in which he killed his mother and brother and drove his father crazy, it's scary because it shows that he was both like and unlike other people. Even though people might want to think he is just something made by the Upside Down, he is actually a person, which makes him even scarier. We can't leave out when Steve is sucked into the Upside Down and Eddie's death. Steve is one of the Stranger Things characters that people like the most, so it's hard to watch him go through pain, but that's what happens when he gets pulled into the Upside Down and almost dies. It's the kind of scene that this show's 4th season does best. Even though most of the audience knows that Steve probably won't die, there is just enough doubt in this scene to give it a lot of weight and meaning. When any character could die, these times are even scarier. Eddie was one of the best new characters in Stranger Things after the 1st season. Even though he was strange, he had a strong hold on many people who watched him, as well as the characters. He was also a real hero when he gave his life so that the others could get away. Even though his death scene has a lot of meaning, it is still very scary to see a fan favorite character get killed by the bad people who live in the Upside Down. No one could help but wish he could have lived. Next, when Henry reveals who he truly is to Eleven, the discovery of Upside Down creatures in the lab, and the massacre at Hawkins' lab. Vecna is one of the scariest bad guys in horror movies. He is angry and strong, so there isn't much that can stop him. In his human form as Henry, he's even scarier, and the moment when he shows who he really is and what his plans are is very unsettling. It makes it even worse that he was able to convince Eleven to go along with his plans by being charming and convincing. In these scenes, he seemed to have a sinister charm that was meant to make people shiver in their seats. Hopper is one of the most courageous people in Stranger Things. He deserves a lot of credit for being able to stay alive for so long in a Russian prison. When it's found out that the Russians have many creatures from the Upside Down in their lab, it's one of the most subtle but still very scary moments. It's a strong reminder that they don't fully understand how big what they're doing is and what they're willing to put the fate of the world at risk. As Eleven's powers start to come back, her memories of her time at Hawkins' lab also start to come back. As one reveals himself to be the young Creole boy, who is also Vecna, Eleven sees a horrifying picture of each of the young lab residents' dead bodies. Eleven finds out that one was the one who killed them, not her. Eleven thought she could trust one, but in a matter of seconds, he turns out to be a killer. His power, which seems to be 1,000,000 times stronger than Eleven's, is scary. Finally, Max's mother becomes her worst nightmare, and Max's almost death. As the team realizes that Max is probably the next person Vecna will kill, they try to come up with a plan to save her. Max prepares for her possible death by writing farewell letters to everyone she loves. She stops by her house to give her family letters. When she sees her mother outside, she decides to say goodbye in person. What should have been a touching moment turned into a nightmare all of a sudden. The sky is filled with gray clouds, the clothes hanging in the garden start to drip blood, and Max's mother slowly changes into Vecna, telling her that she deserves to die. Even though she doesn't die the first time Vecna kills her, she doesn't have nearly as much luck the second time. It's scary enough to see other characters go through the horrible things that Vecna has planned for them, but it's even scarier to see Max go through the same thing. This is a scene that helps put Stranger Things into the category of real horror. Even though Eleven seems to pull back into the world of the living, viewers can't help but realize that she may never be the same as she was before. Well, that's it for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Till next time, cheers.